The next change we want to make is these days. So the days, hours, minutes, seconds, we want to make these generic as well. So another way that we can change things, so if we go look, let's find them in the HTML. So in the HTML, what they are, so here's a div, and then within the div, there's a span. And it's the span that we want to change. So we want to change that 58 to a DD and that 10 to an HH. And so we're going to make them generic. And so what we want to get is we actually just want the span. And then we're going to change a property of that. Now, we're going to use a different property this time. We used inner HTML up here, and that lets you change text and include an HTML element. Now, we're going to be using a different one. It's called textContent. And textContent, again, is everything between the opening and closing tag, but it won't, but it'll ignore any HTML. So now when we do that, we're not using any HTML here, so we can actually use the other property. So we're going to do document dot, and we're going to get the element. We're going to get the element exactly the same way, and we need its ID. So if we go to tiny clock, we're going to get, the first one is days. So put that in quotes because it's a string. And now we're going to change the text content property. And we're going to set it equal to, again, a string, and we want this one to be DD. So we're just putting in generic letters to represent that. We're going to do this for the hours as well. So get element by ID. And this one is going to be hours. Let's go see. Oh, it's HRS. So we want to follow that pattern. HRS. And again, we'll use the dot text content. And we'll in here put HH. All right, we can do this 2 more times. So we want to get the element by ID. Oops, I need a dot. Dot get element by ID. And in here, I want to put the next one, which is MINS for minutes. And I'm going to change its text content equal to MM. And then the last one is the seconds. So document.get element by ID. And how did they do seconds? SECS. Notice these have to match exactly, or if it can't find an element with that exact ID, then you'll have nothing. And then you get an error because it'll say it couldn't find it and you can't. Well, yeah, maybe I should show you that error. Let's do it correct first, and then we can go back and look at the error. All right, so there we've set all 4 of them using text content. So now we refresh, and what did it do? It set those to the content that we expected, the DD, the HS, the MM, and the SS. Notice that they're capitalized. And so this has been done by style, where it's setting it all to all caps. So we actually did put the lowercase in there, and that's what would be displayed if it hadn't been for that style setting. So what happens then if we miss one? So let's say that here we put hours, and we save that, and we refresh. What happens? Notice it didn't change. It remained the 10, and nothing after it changed. So what we're seeing here is an error occurring, and when that error occurs, then it actually causes other things to not work. So this is a great time to use our developer tools. So I'm going to click F12 to open up the developer tools, and I want to go into the console, and here it's showing me that error. And this is really helpful because it tells me what the error is. Sometimes that'll make sense to me, sometimes it won't, but it tells me where the error is. And it says tinyscript.js line 19, so we can go find it. But what it's saying here is that it cannot set the property text content, that's the property we're trying to set, of null. So if we go back to line 19, here we are on line 19, and it says I can't set the text property of null. So what it's saying here is that it didn't get the element. So since it couldn't find the element, what was returned was null. null. That's a special value in JavaScript. And that's what gets returned when it can't find an element. So then it returns null, right? That method, getElementById, returns null. And then we do null.textContent. And that doesn't work because it can't do the property textContent of null. So when that happens, when you get that error, and by this is really common, so when you get that error, know that you're having it didn't work to get that element. All right, so there's the error, and it didn't find that element. The reason it didn't find it is because the ID was incorrect. So if I go back and I say, oh, I can't find an hours ID, I can find an HRS ID. So I save that, and I go back and refresh. No error in the console. I close this out, and the HH worked, but also the MM and the SS worked. So there we've been able to get several elements and change them. In the first one, we changed the inner HTML. In the last four, we changed text content. These are two different properties. They do almost the same thing. The difference is inner HTML allows HTML tags, and text content will ignore them. If there's any in there, it will ignore the HTML tags. So that's the difference between the two. You can still use inner HTML if you don't have an HTML tag, and it will still replace the content with just plain text.